Maybe you're at a place right now where you are just really fired up for God. He's working in your life. He's speaking to you. He's doing amazing things. You're laying your hands on sick people and they're getting healed. And it's awesome. And maybe you've started to look around you and see other people at home or at your work, family members or friends, even people who say they love Jesus, and you just don't sense the same passion from them. You feel frustrated because you feel like they just don't get it. Maybe you're even judging them. I want to tell you there's no room in our heart for anything except Jesus. There's a story in the Old Testament of Elijah. That's where he had been faithful for God. He'd been zealous. He stood against all the gods of the day, and God showed up in power in his life. But all of a sudden you fast forward a chapter and Elijah's asking God to kill him. He's frustrated because he says, I'm all alone. There's nobody else left. Nobody seeks you. And God says to him, don't you see, Elijah, that I've set aside 7,000 people who have the same heart for me as you do? But you see, Elijah couldn't see it because he'd taken his eyes off of God and took his eyes down to the earth level and started looking at people and how he compared for them who was more passionate about God. In Romans chapter 11, Paul wrote to the church of Rome because they were having a similar problem. Their hearts had come alive. They found that in all of their unworthiness that God came through and Jesus loved them, and they saw the simplicity of the gospel and they started living it out. And God started speaking to them, and power and wonders and signs started coming. But then they started looking to the Jewish people in their country around them. And they saw that the Jewish people held on to all of their rituals and all of their feasts and all these rules that they said they had to do in order to be right with God. And they said, you know what, they just don't get it. And they started to judge them. And the Apostle Paul wrote to them that just like in the day of Elijah, that even now God is rising up a remnant of people who know him. And it's not a remnant of people to hold it for themselves. It's to know who they are so they would share it. And then he tells them the truth about them. He says this. He said, at the present time, there's a remnant chosen by grace. And if it's by grace, it can never be based on your works. The reality is that what God is doing in your life right now, if you're fired up for him, it's really not based on how good you've been. It's completely based on how good he is. And if you've come into the place where you've danced under the waterfall of his grace, that's awesome. But it's really important that we don't step out of that and start to judge those around us. In fact, Paul, when he's writing to the church of Rome in verse 20, he says this. He says it's so important that you don't be arrogant, but rather tremble. And that word arrogant means high-minded. It means to think more of yourself as you ought to, or to look down on others. He said, don't spend your time looking at everybody else and talking about where they're not, but rather you should tremble. It means to have your breath taken away because you're in amazement of where you're standing and you realize that you didn't earn it. And it's a fragile thing that you need to be careful with. When we come to the place with God where he's done something amazing in our life, it's really important that we don't judge other people around us. I just want to encourage you, if you're looking in your life and you see a blind spot in a family member or a friend, something they don't see, there's a few things you can do about that. First of all, I would humbly pray. Listen, if you can see a blind spot that they can't see, it probably means there's a blind spot in your life that other people see. And so I always go to God. If I see a blind spot, I go, oh my goodness, God, this person seeks after you and they love you and they don't see this thing. It means there's things that I don't see, and I pray that you'd set me free. The other thing I would do is recognize that sometimes we judge by the wrong standard. Elijah didn't see 7,000 other righteous people because he was only looking at one thing. Sometimes we don't give credit to where people really are on fire for God. I would ask God to open up your heart and open up your eyes to the people around you that you could love them and not judge them with pride. Just one other note. If God's been moving in power in your life, maybe you're speaking in tongues or receiving words for people or laying your hands on the sick and seeing them healed, man, that's amazing. But it can be so easy for us as people to take our eyes off of the giver and start looking to the gift. And start even looking to the gift as a ladder that we climb that makes us more spiritual. When the 72 were sent out by Jesus, they came back and said, Jesus, guess what? Even the demons have to submit to us in your name. It's awesome. Look at what we can do. And Jesus affirmed them. He said, you know what? Yes, this life is possible. I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. It's awesome. But nonetheless, where I really want you to keep your eyes, what I really want you to rejoice in is that you belong to me. In the same way, we can never take our eyes off of who we belong to. We can never allow the gifts to lead us to elevate ourselves above others. Let's walk in humility, and let's not fill our heart with anything except Jesus. Hope, not hype.